Okay, well, thank you for having me.
And Mike, I will introduce you if that sounds okay.
Perfect.
I was just waiting because it didn't say record on mine, but Lisa, it sounds like it's recording. So I want to welcome everybody, whether you're here live with us or listening to the recording. It's a great opportunity for us to talk to Mike Haynes. And Mike and I owe Mike a lot of thanks, not only because of all the work that he's done and all the ways he's pointed me in various directions to kind of explore things. But when Mike was over in Michigan, he worked with Lisa Sitkins. And I can still remember that, Mike, when you said, oh, you should get in touch with Lisa. And I mean, that's been one of the best things that ever has happened to me. So not only professionally, but personally. So that was really, really super. And Mike Haynes was part of the Michigan Co-op when we first launched. He was up in Nice Community Schools, which is where actually you two met, though, I guess, was it Boyne City or Jordan? East Jordan?
East Jordan.
Okay. And then, Mike, you went up to Nice Community Schools, which is, of course, where Lisa's from. So, when you moved, Mike, it was really, I felt really bad because, we loved having you as part of the Michigan Co-op. But it's been nice to stay in touch. And I didn't realize until you kind of indicated that to me that, you've been gone a while. It feels like it hasn't been that long, but it's been 7 or 8 years, I guess. So I'm glad we have stayed in touch. And myself, I'm a Wisconsin Badger. So it's nice to know that we've got people holding up the torch over there with good things in Wisconsin as well. So I'm going to transition over to Mike in just a second. But I wanted to make sure that everybody knows this is being recorded. And, Lisa and I are facilitating this conversation. And if you have any questions, you can jump right in, open your microphone and ask when, that Mike will be kind of leading us and you'll know when there's a time to kind of jump in with your questions or do them at the end, or you can put them in the chat and then Lisa can read those and we can get those, asked either, like I said, throughout the webinar or at the end, whatever seems to fit best. So, but we really encourage conversations. This is such an important topic. Prior to us recording, we were talking a little bit about it. We may go back and revisit some of those interactions because, I think the time is finally coming where we're talking about, learning in a different way when we look at competency and personalization. And with that personalization piece, we're looking differently at not just the academics anymore, but, the social, emotional, the pieces that bring hope to kids. I know there's a lot of conversation around hope and how that relates to learning. And I listened to a podcast this morning that was all about the brain research around how this idea of creating that happy human being in a child makes a tremendously huge difference in their, how receptive they are to learning and how they interact with the learning experience. So, Mike, I'm just so thrilled not only to have you with us, but to have your topic as it is. And I will now hand it over to you, and I hope that everyone enjoys the conversation this morning. So thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you, and I do appreciate you inviting me. And I'll start to give some context to where I'm coming from. I'll spend a minute here just giving some background, if that's okay. So currently, I'm at Cooperative Educational Service Agency 10, where I'm the agency administrator. We're one of 12 educational service agencies in Wisconsin, similar to ISDs in Michigan. Our agency has 29 member districts, and yet we serve more than 100 statewide on various projects and services that we provide. Unlike educational service agencies in many states, Wisconsin CSAs don't receive any direct state aid or funding. So all of our revenue is based on services sold or grants and contracts from other agencies. So we're very entrepreneurial. And on that note, I'd say that anyone listening to this or participating today, if you see any intersections in the work that we're doing, we'd love to talk to you about ways that we could partner, even across the lake. I've been in education for 25 plus years, 8 years as a principal in East Jordan and 4 years as superintendent up in Nice. I've been at CESA 10 for 7 years. And again, this is very much like a superintendent position, except I don't have any buses or students or parents or sports. And as I said earlier, since we're an entrepreneurial agency, I spend a significant amount of my time focusing on the business of our agency, evaluating services, working with members and staff to develop new services, and establishing metrics to measure our effectiveness. I was really enthused when Marcia invited me to participate in the series here, and more so when she said I could actually lead one. Like all of you, I've seen countless initiatives, mandates, best practices come and go, and Wisconsin is no different than Michigan, in that we've spent a significant amount of time over the past decade or more debating and dealing with collective bargaining issues, evaluation systems, new best practices like project-based learning, personalized learning, response intervention, yada yada. And the risk, at the risk of sounding cynical, which I assure you I'm very much the opposite, I've come to believe that all of these things are frankly worthless unless we first teach students what it means to be happy. And so for the time we have this morning, I'd like to share my thoughts and seek some feedback on really 3 things. One, what happiness is and how it connects to purpose, the connection between happiness, purpose, and resiliency, which is critical today more so than ever, and practices that can be taught and learned, whether adults or students, that affect happiness. Yeah, and I should note that while my ultimate goal is that the adults in the pre-K-12 system identify ways to help children learn the skills that allow them to be happy, healthy, creative people, the shift has to happen for us adults first. And I think a phrase that I've used or stolen is that we've all heard is you've got to put your oxygen mask on first. So a lot of these things need to start with us, and then I think we can help young people. Any thoughts, questions at this point? Hearing none. Are we still on?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay.
You can go ahead. Thanks, Mike.
And I should also say I appreciate the opportunity to talk through this. I'm doing this presentation is going to turn into a session at a conference this spring at a Bridging to Resilience conference in Kansas. So this is an opportunity to bat around some of the things that I feel like saying and hear the thoughts you have. So this slide that I just put on is really what tipped me over the edge in terms of coming to grips with the problem that I think we have in society. We're all born with a spark of curiosity and wonder and positive outlook hardwired into our genes that allows us to feel content and joy and euphoria just by simply experiencing life. And yet from an early age, we probably can all think back to when that happened, we are conditioned that happiness must be preceded by an achievement, a degree of learning, a job, material gains, and it's no surprise why so many adults have difficulty finding contentment. And so again, the quote, we wait all week for Friday, all year for all life for happiness. Was there a question? Okay. On that note, though, while anticipation and excitement about what's next is a natural human thing, the notion that our joy comes from the next thing on our plate or the next effort really saddens me. And despite what the framers of our Constitution said, the cycle of pursuing happiness, whether it's looking forward to a weekend, a holiday, a diploma, a job, or any other achievement, that cycle is never ending. And I think it explains why some of the richest people, or people that we think, for all practical purposes, appear to be successful, lack joy in their lives. And I think it's because they're always chasing the next level of attainment and not satisfied with their present. So I want to stop there and ask your thoughts on what I just said.
Well, Mike, you're just speaking to my entire life philosophy in living and raising my child and entering public education as a homeschool mom and I remember asking a group of educators a long, long time ago. You might remember, Marcia, they were talking about the achievement gap, which didn't mean anything to me. I didn't understand it at all. I was just kind of sitting in the room. How much, when they were figuring all this stuff out, how much emphasis they put on happiness and joy. And it was just dead silence in the room. Do you remember that, Marcia?
I don't know that I do. I mean, when was that, Cindy? Where were we?
A long time ago. I think we were in Lansing, and John Daly was kind of goading me to say something because I was just sitting there, because I really didn't understand what they were talking about, the achievement gap, just because I'm not an educator and I was new to everything and I didn't understand it. And so I said, well, I don't have anything to add, but let me ask a question. So you're just speaking to I'm just so excited to hear you talking about this, Mike. I can't wait to hear what's to come, because I really believe that happiness is the key. And that was my whole philosophy in educating my son, was if he's happy, life will fall into place.
That's great. Great. Thank you for sharing that.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
Any other comments? Well, I'll keep going. So from all of the readings I've done, talking with people, and I've been chewing on this and wanting to speak about it for more than a year or two. I've really come to believe that happiness is a byproduct of purpose. And if you think about young humans, so infants, toddlers, young children, our purpose is instinctual. It's biological. It's about learning and exploring and building neural pathways. So, for example, if you watch any young child play, it's obvious that they're living their purpose, which is to explore and learn, and that feels good to them. And the word we use for that is happiness. Yet, again, as I said earlier, when young children come to school, they're vessels of curiosity. Yet I think the system, including all the adults in it, start to suppress that intrinsic purpose to explore and play. And the result is that most children then are conditioned to believe that their purpose is not internal, but instead measured by how we do on tasks or in sports, the amount of education we receive, the career we select, the material successes we experience. And essentially, we teach children how to get work, but we don't teach them how to enjoy their work. And I believe, personally, that children actually get reprogrammed, and that, including all of us, and that their ability to experience joy in the moment becomes muted or silenced by external pressures that equate happiness and feeling good with attainment of something. And I'll just rhetorically ask you if you've ever heard anyone or been asked yourself, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there's this slide that I found, or meme, of John Lennon that I think is pretty appropriate here. And it resonates with me because I believe most children, if able to respond instinctively, would also say, I want to be happy. However, again, by the time children get to school, the conditioning to be something I referred to above has occurred. And I was telling Marcia earlier, think about all the books with smiling firefighters, or police officers, and doctors. We start as young as we can, suggesting that there's got to be something next rather than the moment. And if John really said this in school, he was obviously he had a pretty strong self-efficacy and still intrinsically wired. So the next piece I want to sort of move into is, how does happiness and purpose help us be more resilient? And this is where I've been, been talking about happiness and thinking about this, and it's all felt good, and I knew in my heart it's right, but it's a little fluffy when you talk about this with people. So I finally have been able to find some research that does connect this to what's actually happening. There's quite a bit of research emerging regarding the connection between purpose and happiness, including evidence that corroborates the idea that meaningfulness is related to happiness and positive well-being. People who report knowing their purpose demonstrate less neuroticism, anxiety, depression, and than individuals with reporting less meaningful lives. People who report greater meaning in their lives also report that living in the present, having a fuller awareness of their emotional reactions, idealism, seeing a positive worldview, being more sociable, and having higher self-confidence. And people who report regular experiencing happiness are more resilient and capable of dealing with trauma and loss. conversely, there's evidence that people who report not being aligned with their purpose at home or work or both are less likely to be happy. What are your thoughts, initial takeaways on what I just said there? Cindy, John, Marcia?
Yeah, I'm just, well, I was hoping that, somebody else might jump in other than me. Sometimes it's good to hear other voices here, but I'm always happy to give my 2 cents worth, because, the thing though that kind of crossed into my mind, so it's not right on target with what you just talked about, Mike, but it's more of why, how are we going to make this happen? And I know you're going to talk about some of that piece and maybe go into a little more depth with us, but, with all the initiatives that we talk about that we know are important, how do we, and some view it, as you said earlier, as an add-on, how do we do we have to clear the slate and start all over? How are we going to make these things happen for kids when we know it's relevant and it makes a difference? And how do we, a lot of this is, like you were saying earlier too, comes from kind of the emphasis of the home. How do we, shift gears so that the emphasis is varied, and it's not just focused on one or two things that have traditionally emphasized what is important.
Right.
For
go ahead. Sorry.
Academic. How do we get beyond that? Go ahead.
Well, I think, and as I might have said earlier, it really has to start with the adults, because right, we can all say that social emotional learning and teaching students how to have a positive outlook and feel gratitude and be happy, those are all important. But until we ourselves experience that, it really is. I don't know that we're invested in it. And I've been enthused here with some examples. We've got a team of folks that are working with us that have developed what they call environments of success. And it's really built around helping students and adults identify their purpose, and strengthen their self-efficacy, and then the byproduct is creating some collective efficacy, which, if we tie that back to educational research, Hattie says is the #1 factor or determiner in student achievement. So I think there is a way to connect this. But I've seen adults who have said to me, and this is not an exaggeration, they've said, I'm 48 years old, and for 48 years I've not known what my purpose was, and I all of a sudden I'm happy because I'm doing what I realize is my purpose, and I've aligned that, and I've allowed myself to feel, and I've never been this way before. In my adult career, I've never felt happy. And so I think it's possible if we can help adults make that transition, then it's almost, once it's there, it's easy, right? It's not something that's different, that like an educational mandate in which we take that, it's an external force, and then we do what we need to do. It's very internal. In fact, that's the conference I'm doing in April. The strand of the conference is self-care. So it's about trauma-sensitive schools, and there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff about how to make sure we help kids be resilient. Yet there's a critical piece to that, and that's that the adults need to have the habits that help them be happy, healthy, creative as well. So earlier I said the example of a child. In the example of a child, happiness is a byproduct of purpose, and it really can start at the granular level of the daily experience. There's no way to avoid hardships in life, but the more happiness we have in our bank, the more opportunities we've experienced joy, then the higher likelihood that we're able to recover and be resilient from those hardships and those difficult times. If I was going to do this, or when I do this as a face-to-face session, I would probably ask you to turn to your neighbor and share a response to the question, or to this statement: I will feel successful if, at the end of the day, what happened? So instead of doing that as a group, might be awkward here, I just sort of ask you to reflect on that, and individually. So again, the question, if I will feel success if at the end of the day, something happened. And the example I want to give, because again, I want to go back to as adults and for kids, we can't make a giant leap overnight. I think we have to start with the granular and how do I identify my purpose right now or today? And then that can grow into my larger existence. An example that actually happened through a conversation here at work, I was, a few months ago, I was annoying my staff because I would ask them what their purpose is every day. And someone was sort of rolling their eyes at me and said, well, my purpose is, and they sort of talked about their have-tos that day, about taking care of a parent who's aging and the frustration about that and the things they have to do. And so I asked them to twist that. And they said, well, my purpose today is to help my mom with her shopping and make her feel like the most important person in the world. Now, think about that. If you as an adult said that, and that helped, your frame of mind, obviously, going into that day or that task has to be different. Think about if we did this with kids every day. If we taught kids we taught and then helped them practice every day as they enter the school or as they wake up, identifying what their purpose is today. You know, would we get a child that would say, my purpose today is to make my friend Susie feel better because her dog died last night? So think about how that just shifts the social emotional engagement of that student, the classroom. And so again, I can keep going. You know, you can imagine a workplace where a boss is asking that question every day as well. You know, which implies that, you know, you have a choice to tell me what your priority is today. You have a choice about what role you play here, and the same I think goes for students. There's an emerging body of work around this whole identifying purpose, and as I said earlier, how it can affect self-efficacy and collective efficacy. And you could spend a whole day or more doing that. And I'd love to have maybe a follow-up conversation sometime. So any thoughts about what I just said there? I know I rambled a bit.
Oh, I'm going to jump right in because I do have some more thoughts. I mean, what I want to ask you, Mike, is I know you're saying it, you know, it needs to start with the adults, but is there a way to make it start with kids so you're not kind of erasing what's there? You're starting with a cleaner slate. I mean, you look at the quote you've got up on the screen for us. I mean, that's
right.
A 5-year-old. I mean, you know, so can we learn from them? I dare say, Cindy, I'm not sure, but I question you, Cindy, as you were working with your son, did you find that you were learning kind of next steps from him? You know, it was rather than you kind of,
It was exactly that. Like, he's leading me toward not just his happiness, but mine as well. I think that's the important part, is these kids will lead us toward their happiness, which is important, but we find that our happiness is coming right along with it. Because in nature, you're going to be happier when you're making others happier. And children is the ultimate. They don't hold back their happiness. It's right there in your face with every look in their eye and, you know, expression on their face. It's just, the joy is just insurmountable. And if you I've walked through a lot of schools and looked in a lot of windows of classrooms, and I haven't seen any happiness on anyone's face yet.
I'm gonna suggest too, Mike, that at some point maybe we do another call, like with some of the homeschool people, and maybe just you and Cindy or something. But what I have learned from these homeschool partnerships is you walk into the building, like I went down to Cindy's in Gull Lake, and then now Traverse City has our homeschool partnership. It's exactly what Cindy's saying. I mean, you walk into that building, there is laughter, there is activity, there is a lot of learning. It's not traditional because in Michigan, they cannot take academic courses through the public schools. They can only do kind of what they call the non-essential. But that's not the whole thing. They could be doing anything. They could be doing Algebra 1, and I guarantee you it would be a different environment than, you know, Cindy looking in on a classroom. These people are happy, they're engaged, the families are there, the little kids, the babies. I mean, it's a community coming together to educate kids. It is unreal.
Yeah, and to your question, again, I do think the adults have to, the adult in the room or in charge or in the place where they have an opportunity to affect a child, they have to internalize this, but I think it can happen quickly. I mean, I've said I've been talking about this stuff for a couple of years, maybe. It really, and I've got a couple of people around here that have just started talking about it this year. So they've made the quick jump, and once it's internal, but I think helping kids can, I think you were alluding to too, is it can be therapeutic yourself. Or Cindy maybe said that there are a ton of ways you can nurture purpose, nurture happiness, and again, and I think once you understand that that's an opportunity and you're feeling the benefit yourself, then yeah, I think you can have two trains going the same track together, the adult and the student, so you're not waiting until all the adults in this, because you're right, to have a whole school staff shift their paradigm is probably not feasible in a month or a year. It takes time. But it's also about having conversations like this. So I've thought, what's next? So I'm talking with you about this stuff. I'm going to talk at a conference, but I'd love to have an opportunity to go into an elementary school and meet with a teacher team, like let's say a third grade teacher team, and talk about this and get them dialoguing like we are, and then seeing what organically grows out of that. Just simply having that conversation and making it okay to talk about something other than the gap or student achievement. Will that be a chain reaction? A friend of mine has a really great story. He as a kid, his wife have a kid that graduated from college. He's probably pushing 30. The guy's 55 or whatever. When he's 51, his wife comes in and sat down next to him and said, "I have a surprise," and they were pregnant. So he's 51, thinking about having this child. He's gonna be 80 when this kid gets through college, and on a daily basis, because I follow him on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and he said to me one time, we've had to realize we've got to live his world. So which told me a couple things. It was impactful in that it meant as adults, how many times do you can hear parents in the background saying, "Turn off that awful music. We didn't listen to that kind of stuff in our day, blah, blah, blah." And there's all kinds of examples, I think, I can think of myself when growing up, where good meaning adults would say something and infer a judgment on something, whether it's the music we listen to, the books we read, the friends we have, the hobbies we have, the ambitions, and the statement, live their world, live his world, I think flips that and reminds us that it's not my right to decide what's going to make you happy or that 3-year-old happy. It's certainly my right to pave the way so I can remove as many barriers and obstacles to their finding their joy. But to establish a system or a judgment based on their choices is stifling of that purpose and the happiness. So I thought that was pretty amazing for a 50-year-old, and I say that being looking down that date as well, to have that kind of open-minded approach. I'm fast-forwarding through a lot of this, but for me, there are really a couple critical takeaways that I'd like to have. And first is that I believe it's in all our best interest to explore the notion that happiness is a condition that shouldn't be limited to special occasions or accomplishments. It's the journey, not the destination. And the second takeaway is that once we or the adults in our orbit make that shift that we were just talking about, then we can begin thinking about ways to help children. And like any other subject in school, purpose and happiness are skills that can be taught and can be learned. And there's a great video, we don't have time to do it here, but if Cindy, I think you would really like this. It's if you Google, it's a TED Talk by a kid named Logan, and I forgot his last name. So he did a TED Talk when he was like 13, and then he did it again when he was 15. If you find the 13 one, he's like this homeschool kid, and he's spending his days skiing and backpacking. And as a 13-year-old, he summed up what we should be teaching in school better than any educator I've heard. And again, so I think that would be something I would lead you to, and if you could take a chance to take a look at that, because I think that for me was actually one of those profound moments where I thought, yeah, that's right. Why are we stumbling over all these things that don't affect our long-term happiness? But anyway, in his video, he also talks about how these are all skills, and since seeing that, that's when I really started doing some research about, can you teach happiness? And there are, there's 1,000 different ways, and if you Google it, you'll find a bunch of different recipes. But really, gratitude, forgiveness, kindness, positive outlook, identifying your purpose, those are all things that you can learn and then practice every day. Regarding purpose, again, I think simply by helping children identify their unique qualities and the way they enjoy expressing those qualities can help them distinguish purpose from accomplishments, right? So when I did this exercise, I felt like my unique skills are communication and creativity. And then I said, okay, so how can I use, how do I use those to make others and myself feel better? And as I started thinking about that, everything I do, currently, and what I'm doing right now, for example, is if I can align what I'm doing on a daily basis using my communication skill, creativity, and my communication skills, one, I'm feeling good because I'm doing things that I like to do and that feel good, and I'm seeing a positive result, hopefully, right? So that's just a snapshot. And again, we could spend a whole day talking about helping adults get to that point, but I think once the adults get there, then I think we're going to be in a position to help students get there. Any thoughts there? Again, I've been fast forwarding through this, and I apologize for that, but thoughts?
I think what you're touching on, Mike, is like something that when you watch a kid learn in a more free way, like we do in homeschooling, what you just said about looking at your unique gifts. So we take that, some of us, depending on how we homeschool, and we look what their unique gifts are, and we try to figure out a way for them to learn everything they need to know through those gifts and through those curiosities and what inspires them. So it's like more of are we teaching happiness? No, we're trying to inspire happiness. And then if you take it to what their gifts are and let them take those gifts, there are ways that whatever their gifts and their interests and their curiosities are, I believe that any kid can learn everything they need to know through that pathway. I've seen it happen time and again.
I'm so glad you said that. And even as you said that, it made me think, I don't think I've articulated this, but I've been a huge advocate and supporter for personalized learning and project-based learning and engaging kids in different ways. And the piece that's missing, oftentimes the piece that's missing is a really high-quality, universally adopted curriculum. But the piece that's missing when we say we're going to allow students to help drive their education, their learning, is before we do that, we've got to make sure that they know what their skills and passions are. And so I think, again, this can all start if at an early age we help students decide or identify what those unique qualities are and how they can use those in everyday life. Wow. And I don't even think that necessarily means they're going to be the same forever. Your unique skills and qualities and things that make you happy as a 5-year-old could be completely different than a 70-year-old. But being able to practicing that in your daily life and your whole life allows, I think, us to then be agile and flexible. Marcia, Lisa, any comments?
Well, I've got a question. Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, I just read an article today about project-based learning, because you mentioned that says that the outcome of project-based learning shouldn't be our concern. It's just the journey of the project-based learning, and the outcome doesn't really matter. It matters to the person doing it, but it shouldn't matter to those of us judging it. That it's just the journey. That's the only part of it that's important.
Right. Have you so I don't mean to keep sharing videos, but there's a documentary out there called Most Likely to Succeed, and Yeah, and so the folks, and you can't just like rent it. You've got to. It's usually a school or an organization. You have to, you have to rent it and schedule a viewing. And the goal is you have a community or a school community view it, and they basically spend, a year in the life of a project-based school and toss around the reasons why that's critical. But to your point, Cindy, the kid that they sort of focus on for a lot of the video is one who's struggling. He doesn't get the project done, but you could see the learning, you could see the passion, and you could see the fact that he was tuned into what he liked to do, and he was trying to use his skills, and the learning was incredible, even though he didn't complete the project. He eventually did after spending summer school doing it, but it was a great example of what you just said. That is. Yeah, and that's, we could talk again about for hours about this whole notion of failure. Like, in some regards, not completing the project could seem like a failure. Well, and I think all of us have probably recognized, well, it's okay to fail, but I don't think our system has really accepted the fact that it's okay to fail. And if we did, then we would stop issuing grades. We would stop issuing averages, right? You get a C because you failed the test at the beginning and you pass the test at the end. That doesn't make sense, right? You pass the test at the end. Failure is just a part of the process of learning. So that could be a whole nother webinar, Marcia, I think.
I agree, I agree, Mike. That's most likely to succeed. I'm going to look that up again. I think they've changed the format. I think they are now making it more accessible without having to organize the community thing, because that was a showstopper. We tried to do it here, and I mean, that it takes a lot of organization, and not that that's bad, but that message, because I did go see it. I went down to Kingsley, and actually I have gone to High Tech High many times because one of my two sons has lived there for over 21 years. So those people are tremendous, and I first time I went in there, and you can see in the classrooms because the walls are glass. So you do see, and Cindy, I would say that is another place where there is some joy. You see kids engaged and happy because, like you're saying, Mike, they've got purpose. So I would, I'll look into that, because what I'd like you to do too, please, if you don't mind, is anything you've referenced, like with Logan and whatever, if you find them, if you could send me some links. We'll include it by your webinar so people can, kind of do some follow-up, and I'll see what I can find about the most likely to succeed, the accessibility of that, because I think they changed it.
Yeah, I remember the name, Logan LaPlante. So if you find his TED Talk, both of them are good. I would say the one where he's 13 was the best, because it's a 13-year-old kid articulating this in front of a bunch of adults. Yeah, to your point, so the last time we did the most likely, some of my staff here and I worked with some area legislators, and we held a viewing at our state capitol for legislators. And it ended up being like 20 people, so it wasn't like we had to have 1,000 people, but that's something, you've got the Think Tank for Change and whatnot. If you have the opportunity to engage with the department or the state, I'd encourage maybe to think about that, because that does also just help flip the thinking about learning. And I really appreciate your allowing me to share these thoughts and really dive into a couple areas that I hadn't even thought of, and I appreciate that. I hope the comment about everything in school being worthless unless we teach them first how to be happy wasn't offensive to anyone. But I would also like to hear, if there's any follow-up after this webinar, or if you'd like to even talk about this offline about ways we could integrate this into a school, I'd love to talk. Or if you see resources and research anywhere on Twitter or online, anywhere, tag me and let me know that this is something out there that we should take a look at. I said earlier too, if there's any intersection here in the work I do here at CESA, or we do here, and your school or your homeschool community, or anywhere, Marcia, that your contacts, let me know. Again, our CESAs in Wisconsin are not prohibited from crossing state lines. In fact, we do a fair amount of work in Minnesota, and we've done some work in Michigan. We'd love to find a school anywhere to talk about some of this stuff and dive a little deeper.
That's a great offer. That is really nice. And, you know, I think, I know you also physically cross state lines when you come this way to your home over here. So if you are here during, you know, the school year, I would be really excited to, you know, physically connect you to one of these partnerships and go in and see what they're doing, because I mean, you won't believe it. You just won't believe it. And it's really, I mean, Cindy can speak to this for a second, because, you know, it's transforming districts. It really, you know, I guess you've been down there now, Cindy, 8 or 9 years, something like that. But now the impact that her program has had on the entire district is blowing my mind in a really positive way. So maybe, Cindy, if you could just touch on that, you know, a little bit, because, you know, I see that as another starting point for making, you know, these organic changes that you were referencing, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I think at Gull Lake and any of the other partnerships, especially the ones that have buildings where you can see it in action, I think that over the years, we didn't go into public school as homeschoolers to try to change them in any way. Our fear was that they would try to change us. But as you know, we started communicating more and started working together, I think they began to see our population in a new light, and they can walk in the door and see the difference between walking in the door of the typical elementary school and walking in our door. And I think it has a lot to do with freedom. Mm-hmm. I think that freedom rings in our hallways, and I don't think public education has much freedom involved in it. You know, I always say, I think if we want this generation to be able to value and protect our democracy, they have to see democracy in action, and they're not going to see it in their daily lives in public school. And I think we really epitomize democracy. And it's amazing what kids do when you free them. You know, like they actually, in our building, they could rollerblade down the hall or longboard down the hall, but never once has any kid ever run into anybody or hurt anyone. You know, you give them the freedom, and they're not going to do it when it's dangerous. They're going to wait, you know. And we see it every day, examples of that.
That's great. Yeah, this sounds dramatic, but it seems like now more than ever is the time where our society is ready and thirsty for this kind of learning environment. You know, how much violence and school shootings and controversy and, you know, et cetera, do we take before we figure out, you know, it's probably because of a lot of people growing up in a world where they're not allowed to be happy. Or not encouraged to be happy, sorry.
I guess I'm wondering too, if I could ask you one more question, Mike. I'm kind of wondering, you know, I think one of the biggest barriers in my head is, you know, because as a former classroom teacher, you know, I made sure I stepped away from teaching Algebra 1 because of what my grandma told me. Get a meeting out of your hand. I mean, there were times with 8th graders, I would have them sit in a circle and read them a storybook. I mean, and from then on, the rest of the day was like, wow, it was just easy. They were just, the tone was there. I mean, I only read for 5 or 10 minutes kind of a thing, but they loved it, and they couldn't wait till, I mean, honestly, I did that every day 1 year, and they loved it. And I covered the same material. It wasn't like I fell months behind everybody else.
Right.
But, you know, but I still had that in the back of my head. It was like, I got to make sure that I don't fall behind. And it wasn't so much for them as it was like, somebody's going to be breathing down my neck that I'm falling behind, or their standardized tests aren't going to be good. And they always did. In my mind, they did as well or better than they would have done in my classroom had I not done that stuff. But I mean, there's so much pressure on standardized testing and evaluation of teachers based on this stuff. I mean, that is a driving force. How do we get rid of that?
Yeah. again, I think we have to get the adults to. I think we have to have the adults make the transition. I would say if every adult can have an opportunity to engage in an exercise where they identify their purpose and their, again, what the qualities that drive them, and the ways that they can find joy and happiness, then I think that's your light through the fog when you're dealing with all the other stuff in school. And I don't know if this is answering the question, but for example, there's another video, and I'll try to get it and send it to you, Marcia, so you can send it out. I've actually, if you just Google "this class teaches happiness," it's like a 4-minute video of this classroom in like Belgium or Denmark. It's all in subtitles, and it's all in a different language, but you don't need to even read the subtitles to see what they're doing. And they're welcoming the kids every day, and then teaching them what we're talking about. And again, you can see the light on in the faces of the kids. And I've got to believe, like I said, that it doesn't take long to learn skills if you're wired, right? If you're, it's when kids are fighting it and the kids are bored or whatever, but if you've got a kid that's enthusiastic, like Cindy said, they can grab their longboard and go down the hallway and then jump on a class and they're living their life. They're what makes them feel good. They're going to be far more wide open neurologically to take in information and assimilate it. I don't know if that was a direct answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I guess part of my concern, Mike, it's like with anything, if we already have that kind of as a priority, then we have these conversations. The people who we almost need to reach are those who either don't agree or haven't thought about it, and
right.
It's harder to get to them. The showing of Most Likely to Succeed down in Kingsley was attended by, for the most part, the people who were kind of on that journey already, looking for alternative ways to teach and learn. This is a big deal. We need to change things on a huge scale. And
what you're talking about, and it seems like every time we've gone into any next best practice, like when we started talking about personalized learning, project-based learning, the biggest barrier was shifting people's paradigm. School was good for me. I learned it in 6 different subjects, and we went to class for 55 minutes, and and it's that paradigm. So I think that's why I think the way to maybe start is one, it's only going to start in pockets where you've got somebody who's a champion of that. So we've each got to be a champion in our respective areas. And as I said earlier, if I could go into an elementary classroom and fire up or get a 3rd grade or a teacher team to think differently about this, and then start incorporating those strategies in their classroom and the way, and then I think the ripple effect may take time, but how long would it take for those kids to go to the next grade level and then expect and demand that their teachers do the same, or then the next? And how long would the other teachers and administrators in the corridors and in the school start to see the happiness that Cindy mentioned? You walk in the school and it's happy, it smiles and excited. And it's got to be a ripple effect. and which means starting small, and then it'll get larger. So I think we have to. I mean, if I could change the world tomorrow, I would do what we're just talking about in some specific locations, and then I would try to share out as much of that as possible, so that more adults see the benefit. But again, I think. Maybe this goes, I'm sort of spitballing here, maybe this goes back to the first thing I said about putting on your oxygen. I mean, maybe we really do have to focus on the educators. or the adults, I'm sorry, in any situation. And because it won't, if I'm an adult in a leadership position or a decision-making decision in a school, I can easily tamp down any effort to do any of this social emotional learning. So we've got to get to the people that make decisions. In fact, that's actually, I'm surprised. Sorry I didn't say this earlier. We're trying to do that here. I've got a meeting this afternoon. We've got a huge new arts center and great location, and they've an outreach program. And so we started talking a couple months ago about. Frankly, I was looking for a way to speak with a larger voice on this whole topic. And so we started talking about, could we coordinate like a community-wide happy, healthy, creative communities event? And so we pulled together, a representative from a lot of the organizations in town, the university, the colleges, the schools, my organization, the arts, the economic development, et cetera. And what our goal is to host a one-day event that we'll call it a Spark or Ignite event, where we spend a day talking about all this stuff, right? And part of that day is talking about how can we implement strategies in our orbit that will affect the people we serve, whether it's customers, whether it's students, whether it's colleagues. And then so that we have this Ignite event, and then that each of those people that are part of that. So we thought we're going to identify like 200 leaders who are in decision-making capacity in the area. And then their charge then will be to go out and spark something in their orbit. So if I'm on the chamber, if I'm the chamber rep, my orbit's going to be businesses and downtown development. And so I might would be to encourage my local businesses to identify ways to help their employees or customers host activities that would be supportive of happy, healthy, creative employees and students and customers, so that ripple effect occurs. And that's maybe the approach. You get the right, the right leaders together. And in the state, in Michigan, for example, I think you could start with, your ISDs, or start with your state superintendent or the think tank.
Hey, Marcia, just want to chime in real quick. And this kind of goes back a little bit to where the conversation was before with Marcia, but something that opened our eyes this year. Many years I worked in alternative ed, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, Mike. I really believe that that positive environment, that overall happiness and instilling happiness of students began with the adults, and we focused heavily on that. And I think that's a big part, but I think Cindy also mentioned how students play such a role and how we learn from it. One thing that's really opened our eyes is in our alternative program this year, although I'm not a direct part of it, is we changed the focus to strictly students and made academics number 2, and made students number 1 from the standpoint of kind of their mental health, knowing that students come in and they deal with different types of trauma on a daily basis. And something that we're really open our eyes so far, and although we're really early in the process, is that by kind of instilling a system in which students are supported, and that we have the supports in place to deal with that trauma, deal with the stress levels that are directly related to that trauma, and making teachers an active part of it. The positive spin-offs have been increased attendance rates, increased course passing rates, and just an overall improvement to the environment of the school as a whole. So, I like what you're saying about happiness, and I really do think it's important. But I also think there's a piece that establishing those relationships and making sure that students feel supported seems to be a big piece in that.
Absolutely.
And I think, Chris,
Absolutely.
Part of that is that you're freeing those teachers from that voice in the back of their head, like Marcia was talking about. I'm going to get behind. I'm not going to have my content covered. I'm not going to have the kids, meeting this or meeting that. So you've been able to direct that focus on the students themselves rather than the content and the the testing pieces.
It has, and I think up to this point, I think they found the same thing Marcia found out with what she did with her algebra class, and doing that reading once a week. And in the end, they're getting just as much, if not maybe more, accomplished because they're not experiencing all the other distractions and issues that come up, with students that you don't have those relationships with, that don't feel supported, because most times that negative behaviors come out in those situations, and set you back, even though you feel like you're really pushing hard through the curriculum.
Excellent. So, Marcia, I don't know if I gave you a clear answer regarding how do we get started. I would say I'd love to keep talking about it, and I'm open to any thoughts you have, and maybe if we can find a way to have this kind of conversation with find a group of teachers or a school or a educational leader that's in the position to hear and think this way, and then start infusing this in their orbit.
Well, it's interesting you're saying that, because Lisa and I were wondering if you might consider joining us in August at Treetops for the Michigan Co-op Conference. And I'll send you information and links, because you could lead a session on this. This is a group of people. Now, these are the receptive people. But you know what? They love to have, more tools in their toolkit to spread the word. And you provided us with a lot of really solid information. So I'll send you that information. But this is, your initial invite. It's August 1st and 2nd, like I said, over at Treetops in Gaylord. And if you're, in the state, or even if you're not, you can come over. That'd be awesome. You would love these people. They are all just like the people you that's who the membership is. They're on these calls. So I'll get you the info and hope that it works into your schedule.
That's great. Yes, thank you. Yeah. And then again, I'd say if there's linkages with the co-op folks, that we can make, let's do that. As I mentioned earlier, there's I have an employee who has this program, whatever. She basically created what's called environments of success, and it can be a half day or 1 day or 2 day journey that really helps the adults identify, helps adults develop and solidify their self and collective efficacy, and then that then can be spin out to schools and classrooms. Would love to see if there's an opportunity for us to share that kind of work over there. That would be also nice.
Good. Sounds great. Sounds wonderful. Mike, thank you. This is not quite as good as getting together face to face, but it's been wonderful to do it this way. And now hopefully we can see it face to face in Michigan at some point. So we will definitely keep in touch, and we'll keep you connected to the people in the Michigan Co-op. They're going to be the ones too who will get the link to all of this so that they can, hear about it. Now, interesting enough too, Mike, I'm still doing these days of conversation with superintendents, and we had to reschedule because people couldn't get. It was supposed to be Friday, and they couldn't get away because there's so many districts that they've had so many snow days. They have to be on site, when they have school. So we're looking at scheduling in April, but I just made myself a note to send out a link to this webinar to them ahead of time. These are the leaders throughout Michigan that come together, and they do, kind of this kind of thing. It is called the Day of Conversation because that's what we do. We get into small groups or large groups, or, one-on-one, however they want to do it, to have the conversations. They don't, as leaders, the buck stops with you guys. So they love to get together and talk with, the others who are in the similar positions and share, the trials and tribulations along with the successes and, good news like you're sharing. So I will be doing that, and I'll let them, maybe you could send me, is it just your contact information that I would give out, or maybe you could just email me what I could share with them,
Absolutely. We'll
what
do.
you provide. Okay, great. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll
been
talk
fun.
soon.
Thanks,
All
Mike.
right.
Okay, I'm sending the snow over to you.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
It's coming.
Yep.
It's coming
Bye-bye.
down right now.